All right, hello everyone. Welcome to the WinUI Community Call September edition. We have a little bit of a new look here, so hopefully we don't run into into too many technical issues, but definitely keep us updated in the chat if something doesn't look or sound right. But really excited to have all of you joining us on this month's community call. So a little bit about the community call to start off. I should probably start out by introducing myself. I'm Anna. I am a program manager on the WinUI team. I deal with a lot of stuff around community engagement as well as kind of awareness and education in terms of, blogs, community calls, documentation, everything like that. So now about the actual call. We do these the third Wednesday of every month. And we do them at 9 a.m. Pacific time. And the next call will be October 21st. That's just third Wednesday in October. So you can always find us on GitHub as well as Twitter for our latest updates. And I believe those links should be displayed right below on our new little layout here. And they're here. Okay. Onto the call agenda. So I'm going to do my usual intro. We're going to get into a few quick updates, and then we will get into the fun stuff. So today we're welcoming Matt Lacey, who is one of our community members, and he is going to be our community spotlight this time around. He's going to be talking about his experience in open source software, kind of best practices, as well as talking all about the RapidXAML toolkit, which is a really cool thing that he built. And then we have our ecosystem spotlight, and we are re-welcoming Kiki to the call. She was on us for the last call, and she is going to talk all about React Native for Windows. And then, of course, we will have our Q&A at the end. So, what is WinUI? WinUI is the native UI platform for Windows 10. WinUI is built for today's modern hardware and devices, and it offers the latest fluent design and styling. You can use WinUI to build .NET apps as well as C++ apps for Windows 10 devices. And WinUI actually powers, the Windows and Xbox OS shells as well as many apps and other platforms like Xamarin Forms and React Native for Windows, which we're going to be hearing more about today. So WinUI 2 is the second generation of the native UX stack in Windows, and WinUI 2 is built for UWP apps. So WinUI 2 consists of the visual layer and the XAML framework in the operating system, and as well as a library of Fluent-based controls and styles. And WinUI 2 gets updates trimesterally. So WinUI 3 is this new third generation of the native UX stack, and it's currently in preview. The last one we released was Preview 2. And so WinUI 3 consolidates the UX technologies that were previously built into Windows, and it consolidates these into a single decoupled framework, and it's made available for every type of Windows app, which means UWP as well as Win32 or desktop apps. So, on to a few quick updates. Our team recently published a blog post in collaboration with the Windows Terminal team, and it's all about how Windows Terminal was actually built using WinUI. I know we must have some Windows Terminal fans in the crowd here. So if you are and you haven't read it yet, it's a really great read. And working with the Terminal team is always a lot of fun. And it's really cool to see how things come together. And it gives you a kind of behind the scenes look at what goes on here. Another update is that Microsoft Ignite is happening next week. And our very own Miguel will be a part of a talk on Windows app development. And I believe the talk should be made available the first day of Ignite, which is the 22nd. And if you watch it, you might just catch a sneak peek of WinUI 3 Preview 3. Also, I know a lot of people have been curious about a feature roadmap, which is basically something that lays out which features are going to be available when for WinUI 3. And I just want to let everybody know that this is something that's in final reviews with our team. And we are planning to publish it this month. So sorry about the delay there. You won't have to wait much longer to find out exactly what's coming when for WinUI 3. So now for the exciting part, I am introducing Matt Lacey. He is the creator of the RapidXAML toolkit. He's a Microsoft MVP, and he's really involved with the open source space. So I'm really excited about this presentation that he's going to give. Matt, you can go ahead and share your screen to our Teams call. And I am going to see if I can figure out how to get you on the screen.
So hopefully you're going to tell me you see something.
Yeah, we see your open source presentation.
Oh, okay. That's good because I'm going to talk about some of my experiences with open source and contributing to open source projects. And I think it's important to say up front that these are my experiences. They'll be different to your experiences, but that's a good thing. You know, one of the strengths of open source is having so many different people work on things. I like to think of open source in this grand sort of utopian vision of everybody working together so the world gets better software. It's a lofty, you know, goal, but I think dream big sometimes. And I think that really can be everybody. You know, there are lots of ways you can contribute and support open source projects. And even if it's that classic example of going in and fixing a spelling mistake, I deliberately don't say just fixing a spelling mistake, because fixing spelling mistakes is really important. I always feel really glad when they get fixed, because it means my error is now being addressed. Especially if it was, you know, my spelling mistake originally, and I'll go and fix lots of other people's spelling mistakes as well. Okay, the idea of fixing a spelling mistake is really good because it's the exception to the rule. You know, the rule, well, the tips being, or my tips being, firstly, don't start with a pull request. You know, fixing a typo, a small spelling mistake, that you can jump into the, you know, the source and make that change. For anything else, start by talking to the people behind the project. You know, some projects will be really glad if you turn up and say, here's this large bit of code I've written, or here's this large bit of documentation I've written, or here's some big thing I've done. They'll be even happier if before that you say, I'm thinking about doing this, how does it fit with your wider plans? Don't start with a pull request. You know, if there's an issue you want to work on, comment on an issue and say, hey, I would like to work on this. Or, you know, if it's something entirely new, say, hey, I'm thinking about this, would you like it? Would it be useful? Does it fit with the wider project? Projects will have conventions. Most of them will have a guide to contributing, and in most of those guides it will say, don't just start with a pull request. But those projects, those conventions and those guidelines exist for a reason, and that's to help everyone move faster. You know, no projects and no developers ever get to the end of their to-do list. There's always more things you can add. There's more things we'd like to do than we have time for. So it's about making sure that everyone makes the best use of their time. That's you as an external contributor, and that's the people working on projects as well. You know, projects have these rules and these guidelines. They might have checklists of things you need to do when you create an issue or a pull request, and they're there for a good reason. They're not there to be difficult or make your life harder. They're there to make the project better overall and make things easier for everybody. So follow those conventions. Assume when people ask you to do something, it's for a good reason. And, you know, and the other way, and it works the other way as well. When people ask for features, assume they have a good reason to do that. But however, you should never just say, hey project, you should do this, you should do that, you should add that feature, this feature. You know, explain why. You know, is this just something you've thought of? You know, does it address an actual problem? What is that problem? How does it exist? You know, you're saying there's a bug here. Well, how does that affect you? Why does it happen? In what ways does it happen? Give information, but you don't need to give too much information. Focus. You know, if you're reporting a problem, you don't need to write an essay, but give us some context and background, enough information to move things forward. That's why things like these checklists for how do you do this, how do you create a reproduce the problem, those sorts of things exist. Be focused in the information you provide, and also, you know, within the guidelines of the projects and its conventions, stay on topic. You know, some projects will be happy for you to have off-topic conversations through the comments on an issue, and that's not a problem. For other projects, that's not appropriate, and just all that extra noise can really affect other people's ability to contribute. So before you start having side conversations and saying, oh, what about this other idea? Put that in an appropriate place. You know, the internet has lots of great places for having discussions, and they aren't always on issues on GitHub or on other projects. But overall, remember, everything helps. You know, I started off talking about that little small contribution to documentation, and it's easy to think about contributing to open source projects just about being code or just about being documentation, but they don't have to be. You know, there are projects I contribute to and, you know, are recognized as being useful and valuable. Well, I pretty much just ask questions. I say, why have you done it that What about this? What about people in this scenario? What about that? Having those extra experiences, differing opinions, differing ideas can help create better software. And ultimately, that's my big goal. We want everyone to have better software. And so there are ways you can do that. There are projects where I primarily just write tests and help test a project. That can be really valuable. Some people find that hard or not something they're able to do. But if you can do things like that, that's great. And documentation too. Documentation can be great. It doesn't just have to be written documentation. You could be, how do I use this API from a different language, a different programming language? How do I have this documentation in another spoken language? I can only just about speak English, but I know that, that's not the case for everybody. And if you can speak other languages, there are loads of projects who would love to have documentation translated, and that's great. And they would love to hear from you, I'm sure. And it's not just about contribution. There are other ways you can support, that everybody contributing to open source or everybody helping make better open source software can be about the support you give as well. This is from one of my support pages. It talks about money because there are projects which can benefit from your money, and whether that's a one-off thing or an ongoing thing. And if you're able to do that, there are lots of projects that would appreciate that, I'm sure. But there are loads of things you can do that don't cost money. If you have a GitHub account and you find a project you're interested in, give it a star. Show that you're interested and find that useful, and leave a rating or a review if there's somewhere you can leave a rating or a review. Those kind of messages, positive messages, are really encouraging and supportive. One of the big criticisms of open source software is that the people doing the work don't get enough positive feedback and enough support. I find that whenever I get a positive review, I get an email from the store saying you've got a new 5-star rating. I've been known to do a little dance in my office just out of happiness. And so spreading that word is brilliant. Talk to people how you talk to people, if it's in real life or online, whether it's sending a tweet, a blog post, however you communicate on the internet. Tell people about the projects you like and they're useful to you. They might be useful to others. Yes.
Sorry to interrupt your flow. I think we lost your video feed. Do you want to try turning off your camera and turning it back on again to see if it picks you up?
Oh, there is my video gone. Hopefully you can see the screen. That's more important than me.
Yeah, we can see the screen. We're just having issues with the video.
Camera's back on.
Okay, I think you're back.
Okay, brilliant. So let's talk about something else. Let's talk about the RapidXAML toolkit. This is a Visual Studio extension. Which doesn't help me be distracted by chat, which may be something I need for the future. This is a Visual Studio extension. Hopefully, the name gives you the clue that it's a collection of tools for helping you write XAML faster and more easily. You can see you can get it from the marketplace. You can get it on its own. If you get the blue background one, it just installs everything. It's available as lots of little packages, so you can have the bits you want or the whole thing. It's also available as part of the UWP Essentials and the WinUI Essentials, which are single installers to get you loads of extra things which will help if you're building apps for UWP or for WinUI, WinUI 3. There's lots of things there. You can check those out. But RapidXAML Toolkit, obviously also available through the extension manager in Visual Studio. This nice blue one at the top just says RapidXAML Toolkit. That gets you everything. But what is it? So RapidXAML Toolkit spawned from another project I contribute to called the Windows Template Studio. Windows Template Studio is an answer to the question, how can we help developers get started building apps faster and more easily in the right direction? RapidXAML Toolkit is about what can we do after that. So if you're not familiar with Template Studio, I'm going to walk through it quickly now. So I have a little pre-recorded video of my demo. I've done that just to sort of keep me to time and so I don't get distracted and try and show you lots of other things. So I'll start that now. You see, we're going to start, we create a new app with Windows Template Studio. We select Windows Template Studio from the new project dialog. We give it a name like you would any other project. And then we have this wizard, which will walk you through creating the app. So we can select the style of navigation, what type of framework we want to use, what pages we want in the app, what other features do we want. Maybe, these might be things that are included in their entirety or things we need to change and build upon. There are some other services we can connect to, and we can add test projects because testing is good. Then we would hit create. But because I've pre-recorded this to save time, I've already got an app which I've generated. It's a simple app with a single empty page in it. And we can see in the Solution Explorer on the right, there's a library and a main app. We had our blank XAML app. The only thing I've done here is I've added some properties to my view model. I'm trying to recreate the scenario where, I might be building an app that displays data from somewhere else. Maybe I'm getting it from a database, from a web UI. I'll have some kind of idea of the shape of the data, and I want to present that on my view, on my XAML. So here we can see the properties. There are some simple ones. There's an observable collection of another property. There's a command. There's an enum. But they're all simple auto properties. We probably want them to implement iNotify property change. And because my base class implements iNotify property changed, I get this little helper that says, hey, we can make this property implement or make the appropriate calls on property changed. My base class also has a wrapper method, so I could call that instead. If this wasn't a view model, and maybe I was building some kind of dependency object, maybe a custom control, I could turn my auto property into a dependency property, just the way you would change anything else inside your C#. But for right now, doing everything just as simple properties will be fine. What I want is my view model to be displayed on my view. So I just drag the view model onto the view. And just like that, I have XAML based on the contents of the class. This is where I wish there was feedback, because normally when I show this, people go, ooh. Now you see that the what's generated is based on what was there. So our identifier was read-only, so it's now in a text block. The name and description, read-write, so they're two-way bindings to text boxes. I had a URI called small image, so it knows to put that in an image. The booleans, a date, the toggle switch. The enum is a radio button group. My list has got a warning about a data type, but Visual Studio can fix that. So my observable collection is a list view, and the data template is populated based on the inherent properties of the type which was in the collection. And my command is now a button wired to a command. You could probably write that yourself quite easily, but I don't know how you could write it as fast. All of this isn't highly configurable. So you see that here I've got a relative panel and everything's just stacked one above the other. That could be a stack panel, that could be a grid with multiple rows and columns. There's lots of ways you can configure that to generate exactly what you want, and there's different configuration options, whether you're doing UWP, WPF, or even XAML forms. So we've got our generated XAML, we can do things with it. So in the latest version of Visual Studio, we get this nice color visualizer. Looks like that, so I don't have to remember what FE00FE is, some kind of fuchsia. But it'd be great if we could visualize other things, maybe like symbols. So I'll zoom in on that in a minute if you can't see. But I've added the mail symbol, but I might not remember that that's the back of an envelope. I really can't remember that the Unicode E1C1 is an open star in the default font. Or if I wanted to go really crazy and use a different font, I could know that FF in Windings is the old Windows logo. Now there's a small bug I've discovered in terms of the sizing of these things, because I've ramped my text up really big so I can show you this, but that'll be fixed soon. But you can see that hopefully that'll be useful, so you don't have to go and look these things up. You don't have to start the design if you don't want it. You don't have to run the app to see what it looks like. Your Visual Studio doesn't do that. Your Visual Studio also doesn't put green squiggles under text like that and have these warnings at the bottom saying you've got a hard-coded string or a hard-coded value in this property, or you've not specified an info scope where you should, or you could. Having localized resources is better for everyone. To localize, it's generally better to localize your code, and this will help you do it. There's a quick action there, which will move the hard-coded string to the resource file for me. That can be a bit fiddly, so the tooling will do it for you. There's an option there to suppress it, or we could configure it to show as an error or a suggestion, or not at all if we didn't want it to. I click on the move it. It's taken away the hard-coded string. It's given it an ID so it can reference the resource. And in my resource file, I now see there's that text it just got rid of. You didn't see it before, but trust me, it put it there. It wasn't there already. There are other things we can have Visual Studio do to help us. Say I wanted my relative panel below the button and the symbols, or the symbol and the buttons, and put it in row 3. Well, I haven't defined a row 3, and now it's going to tell me. And it's also going to let me add those definitions for me. And there's lots of things we can do with grids, and the same thing applies to columns and column spans. If you set a span wider than you've got the rows or columns, it will warn you about that sort of stuff as well. The idea is to find these issues before you're in debug, find them sooner, and help your development run faster. Here I've got a different control, a web view. There's nothing built in to improve to look at web view, But knowing all about WinUI 3, we might want to do something to turn this into a WebView 2. And have a little warning come up. And just like a Roslyn analyzer, you could create your own. You can create your own XAML analyzer now. You give it a name, and like you would see with a Roslyn analyzer, we're going to add 2 projects to the solution. One's going to be a library which has the analyzer in it, and one's going to be a test project, because you should be writing tests for your stuff, so I give you a couple to help you out. And an analyzer is really simple. It implements an interface with just 2 methods. The first is, what is the type of element you want to look at? And for us, this is going to be our web view, because we're going to say turn a web view into a web view 2. I could have this applied to multiple types just by saying any of and then a comma delimited list. I could be really clever if Fonz is watching and say anything containing and then just provide a string, and any element which contains that string will then get flagged up. So I might want to look for old style bindings and do things with them. So I could do that. But for now, we're just going to look at web views. And then we implement the analyze method. You'll see a helpful link to GitHub, which has some documentation on how to do this stuff. And there's also a default implementation there. If you're looking at the code, you will see that it's going to check for an attribute. If it's there, it does nothing. If it's not there, it's going to suggest adding one. We're going to do something simpler for web view, so I'll just get rid of all this. There's the one I'm not going to make you watch me type. You can watch me try and format as well when I talk about it. But we're going to use the action of rename the element. We're going to say this is a warning, so it's not going to be an error or a suggestion. It's going to show up as a warning. We have some text for the code and the description, which show up in the error list below. The replace with WebView 2 is what's going to show up in the tooltip and in the drop-down menu for the quick action. And then WebView 2 is the name of the new element we want to use. So there's lots of options built in, and we can combine them in multiple ways. Once we've built it, we need to reference it in our application so it knows where this new analyzer is. And then I need to rebuild my project, which I won't make you watch. Fast forward through that, save you 15 seconds of staring at the screen. And we can see now that the web view is underlined. If we look in the error list, it says the text we specified in the analyzer. We see the tooltip. With my fiddly fingers, I can eventually click on the option. We click on the replace with WebView 2, it thinks about it. And so those 2 lines of code have given us all that Visual Studio integration and the ability to make the changes. There could be multiple changes, we can combine them together, and we can provide multiple suggestions as well. But that's all within Visual Studio, and that's wonderful. But maybe you wanted to do these things outside of Visual Studio. Maybe you wanted to do these on your CI/CD process. You wanted to check things when they get checked in. I've got a solution there. We just add a reference to this build analysis library. And then whenever you build the project, it will check all the XAML files in the project. It will run the built-in analyzers, any custom ones, any configuration you've done, it will pick that up as well. And there's also this other library called Autofix, which hopefully, as the name suggests, will auto that. It does the same thing, uses the same custom analyzers, but it makes the changes as well. It doesn't just say, here's a suggestion, it just makes the change. So this is a separate project showing that. You can see, again, we're targeting the web view. This is a little bit more complex because it's looking at the namespaces as well, making sure we use an appropriate namespace, but it digs into those extra details to get all the XML namespaces. It looks to see if the one we're using is already used. If not, gives it a unique name. And then it says rename the elements. And then if we need to, also add the XML namespace. Quick little demo just to show you that running. So we're going to run this on a single file. You can see the original file here. 2 web views in it. We run it through the converter. It finds some stuff, makes the changes. We see it's added the controls namespace, and it's renamed both our views. Simple. Oh, the reason I show you that is because hopefully this is going to be what powers the XAML changes within the try-convert tool. So when try-convert gets the ability to upgrade your WinUI 2 apps to WinUI 3, hopefully this is going to be what powers the XAML changes as part of that. Now that was me talking fast and going over a lot of stuff, I know. So just quickly while I take my breath or catch my breath, there are some links for some more information. Obviously, I'll be around for questions at the end, but hopefully that was interesting, exciting, and you don't have to get involved in my open source projects, but there are links there if you want to.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much, Matt. I saw this presentation on Monday, but it was just as cool today. This is really exciting stuff, and I also hope that it helps any of you who are, you know, wanting to get involved in open source and not sure where to start, but also, of course, helps all of you who are interested in using RapidXAML because it's a really cool toolkit. And as Matt mentioned, you can get it, I believe, at rapidxaml.dev. I'll update the description of this video with the link once everything is published and all that. But yeah, thank you so much, Matt. Now I'm going to move on to introduce Kiki. We all, you know, saw her last week and now she's back, or last month rather. But once again, she's a PM on the WinUI team, and she also works a lot on React Native for Windows. She does a lot of cool stuff, and today we're going to be hearing all about the React Native stuff. So Kiki, do you want to go ahead and share your screen?
Sure. That up. Sweet.
Let's
All right,
see.
is that visible for everybody?
Yes, we should be able to see it there. Awesome.
Yeah, so I'm glad to be back. Thanks, Anna. I'm now going to be presenting something a little bit different from last time, which is React Native, in particular React Native for Windows and macOS. But for those of you that aren't familiar with React Native, because I know that this audience is perhaps a little bit different from the people that I normally talk to about React Native, React Native is a JavaScript solution for writing cross-platform apps. And it's actually a framework that was created by Facebook so that they could obviously put Facebook on every device and that they wanted to have it on, because it's a social media solution, so they have it on many different platforms. But also, it is primarily a web application. So what they wanted to do, and they had written that web application in JavaScript. So React Native is an easy way to take your JavaScript website, JavaScript-based website, and make it cross-platform. And originally, they targeted just Android and iOS. And we realized that there are many JavaScript developers out there who would probably want a solution for desktop applications as well. So we went ahead and created an extension to the React Native framework, and we worked with the Facebook team to create this. And we now allow people who have their same JavaScript-based web applications to now port through React Native to Windows and Mac. And what I wanted to talk about today is just a little bit of what that looks like and how it sort of integrates with WinUI and how you can use it today. And also a little bit of a rah-rah moment for my team, because we recently updated to 0.63, which is the latest version that Facebook is on. We try really hard to keep up to date with all the latest versions that Facebook releases, and Facebook releases sometimes on a weekly basis, sometimes on a monthly basis. So they're super fast, and that's a bit out of the comfort realm for us. So we're very excited when we're able to keep up. So it's also a bit of an announcement there. But React Native for Windows in particular runs on WinUI. So all of the stuff that you see when you build a React Native for Windows application is native WinUI controls. And that's actually one of the huge benefits of writing and using React Native, is that it's just translating into the native equivalents. So today I wanted to show a little bit of how that works. And I have an app running here today. And also show that if you wanted to host some content inside your WinUI app that was JavaScript or web JavaScript based, but you also wanted native WinUI stuff, you can just wrap your WinUI controls around React Native. So I'm going to show you a little bit of the folder file structure of what you get when you install a React Native for Windows app, as well as what that looks like in XAML code. But you'll see right here that this black box is the React Native app, and it has its own navigation. It's picking up my accent color as well on the separate screen. So it integrates, and it's showing all of the native controls, and it has some native colors from the WinUI. But this whole box is JavaScript based. And outside over here is typical WinUI, Fluent UI design. So what that means is that I actually have two different sort of implementations. One is what you'd be familiar with. It's just regular XAML. I have the text box that's saying that, hey, I'm outside of the React Native content. And then I have a stack panel, and inside that is the React Native host. And that is hosting all of the JavaScript information and doing all of the guts behind the scenes. So what this is actually hosting is written in JavaScript, which is this stuff right here. So if you're not familiar with JavaScript at all, it's actually pretty straightforward. They've got a similar structure to C# with just these imports can be considered using namespaces, and you've got some function definitions, which in this case, I'm using to define those different scenes for navigation. But down here, you'll notice that I am accessing some platform color. And in this case, I'm accessing Windows platform colors. And this is a new feature that we just lit up in the 63 release, which allows you to access not just platform colors on Windows, but also on macOS, iOS, and Android. So if you know the string name for the color that you're trying to access on the native platform, you can grab that. And the whole point of that is because you want your React Native app to look sort of visually at home on whatever device it's running on and get that performance advantage as well because it's using native controls, but you don't have to rewrite whatever your website JavaScript information was. So I'm just going to pop this over here and we're going to go to the details screen. So I'm going to just change this to a different thing and we can see it update by hitting save. So you can see I'm accessing now the system accent color dark 3. So if you don't know, Windows has a few different color ramp variations of the accent color. And it's being picked up right here natively inside this React Native frame because it is a native thing. So even if I were to go through and change my accent color to something else, it'll also pick that up for you for free. And you can do a lot more than just the colors. That's one of the new features, but we also have access to native components like camera, and you can also host a web view if you wanted to in there. That'll be a bit of an exception. But yeah, if you want to check out more around React Native and React Native for Windows, we have a website here. You can go to, you can actually just go to our GitHub, or I think there's an aka.ms link as well, which I actually don't have here, but I will post it. I'll post it in the YouTube chat. But yeah, this is React Native for Windows and Mac, and you can check it out today. And we also recently released a blog post talking about our recent release. A little bit, another thing I wanted to touch on was that this is specifically sort of geared as a solution for people who are strong in their JavaScript skills and they want to build Windows 10 apps using that and bring over their web experiences. But if you're more savvy in the .NET or C# side of things, you want to go cross-platform, we would probably recommend a solution like Xamarin. Or if you want to go really down level to like Windows 7, and we would probably say that you could take a look at the Uno platform or something like that. But yeah, thank you. That's it.
All right, awesome. Thanks so much, Kiki. Yeah, everybody should check out React Native. I think it's one of the coolest projects that our team is working on. Really great stuff. Definitely read that blog post as well. Okay, now I believe it is time for Q&A. I'm going to switch this view over to our Teams call. Savoy, are you ready?
Sure thing, Anna. Let me just get the question sheet up here. All right, and I want to give a huge thank you to our guest speakers, Matt and Kiki. Everyone in chat, please be sure to ask your questions to our guests there. I'll be continuing to monitor it and pull questions from that. So let's start out with one for, should we give Ryan a break? Let's see if we have one for Anna.
Okay,
Anna,
sorry,
question?
Savoy, just to interrupt you quickly, I'm going to turn on our, what is it, together mode?
Yep.
Just so we can have that fun view. So, folks, turn on your video so Savoy isn't too lonely up there. Thank you. All right. Great.
Cool. You know, Anna, I should give you a break. I'll grab one for Miguel here. Miguel, awesome, your camera's on. So that means, I'm going to say that means you're ready. Will there be any news around the ability to get the window handle from a WinUI 3 desktop window and also around the initialize with window interface with CS WinRT? It would be nice if features like these don't require creating complex wrappers.
Yes, there is some news. We simplify the C# WinRT projections, and right now it's super simple just to get the handle the H-Wing with just one line of code. You don't need nothing else than that. And also, this is a good intro for me because I'm going to demonstrate that in the Ignite presentation. So please sync the Ignite presentation when it's available, and you will see a demo there.
Awesome. All right, Kiki, we have a question for you. Relating to React Native, are there any plans to support React Native Firebase?
I don't know yet. I was actually just saw that comment, was looking it up. The React Native community is huge, and people have written so many tools for things. It's hard for us to like keep track of everything that's going on. I don't think we have any immediate plans for it, but we are going through all of the community modules and stuff, and trying to put in Windows support where we can. And we're also hoping that some people will sort of get into the flow and pick up, and we want to make it easy and work with the developers who are building all of these extra community stuff to integrate Windows and a Windows solution into their apps. So when we get there, we will probably also try to help those devs if we can. If it comes a priority for us to really need to do it, we might actually just go in and do it ourselves and make a PR. But we're doing that already with lots of community modules. So I can't say immediately there's any plans for Firebase, but we'll look into it. Create an issue if you think it's super important, and we'll have it on our log to look at.
Perfect. All right, Anna, are you ready for that question for you?
Yeah, sure.
Sweet. So Eleanor's asking, relating to data grid, we have prepared an issue write-up and simplified sample solution. Should we post this issue in the community toolkit repository or in the WinUI repository? Would love to know if there are any updates to data grid as well.
Sorry, could you repeat the earlier part of the question? Was this a bug or a feature request?
It's an issue write-up, and it sounds like they're wondering if they should post it to the Windows Community Toolkit or WinUI repository.
So you can go ahead and post it to the Windows Community Toolkit repo. So as kind of the main PM on DataGrid, I am regularly checking that repo, and you know, we do try and fix as many bugs as possible, and that's for bugs that you find with the toolkit version of the DataGrid. Obviously, if this is something about a feature request or something kind of like a big issue that you would like to see fixed in a new version of the DataGrid, then there is a kind of a big long discussion issue in the WinUI repo all about feedback for a new DataGrid. You know, what would you want that to look like? I think it's issue number 1500. I've been on that issue so many times, I memorized the number. A little bit sad, but I believe it's issue number 1500 if you want to go and leave any kind of feature requesty feedback on that. But just know that if you do leave it on the toolkit repo as well, we will be seeing it.
Perfect. Thank you, Anna. Ryan, one for you. I hope you enjoyed your break. Thomas is asking, in the February community call, Miguel showed specs of the windowing API. Are there any updates for this?
Yeah, but why don't I turn that to Miguel?
Yeah, I'm not sure why this works for you. Yeah, that's definitely a question for Miguel. So
yeah,
surprise.
Go for it. I'll just extend my break.
Yes, there is an update in the spec. Basically, we also extend the spec supporting new scenario, like, for example, custom title bar. So we add in 2 new APIs, like set title bar, which is allowed just one UI element to be draggable, to make draggable the window at all. And the second API is about to extend the content into the title bar, means that we remove the system title bar, which we keep the buttons. You can just create your own custom title bar. So yes, there were some updates, and there are going to be more updates soon.
Perfect. All right, Kiki, another question for you, and this is coming from DenCake09. They're asking, are all React Native components wrapped in React Native for Windows, e.g. button, touchable, opacity, views, etc.?
So yes and no. So certain controls are basically, when you call them at the React Native JavaScript layer, they are just directly creating a WinUI component where it makes sense. So things like checkbox, text input, and I think even text block and stuff like that. Other things where we know that the React Native developers are expecting a more primitive version of that native component, we are creating primitives around it. So for things like view and touchable opacity and that kind of stuff, we're just generating it via WinUI primitives. So we're probably using stuff like grids and maybe even stack panels. And I think there's, I don't know all of the UI layer, but there's stuff below that that you can also use to create like canvas and that kind of stuff that you can use to create a native experience that's more primitive style. And we're using those where it makes sense.
Awesome. All right. Another one comes to you, Kiki, but I think this is a different subject area from Stefan, who's asking, will there be a way to pull individual WinUI controls without applying the style to the whole application? The reason I ask this is that I'm also dependent on third-party UI controls, e.g. docking library, and applying styles on a global scope would mess with their styles.
I think it would depend on what controls you are using. So if you have your own style sheet declared at the JavaScript layer and you're pulling in a bunch of styles and using them on your JavaScript controls, and then you pull in some native controls, they shouldn't interfere with each other. If you have native controls that you've defined and you're letting iOS theme it the way iOS themes it, and then you run that same app on Windows, then Windows is going to theme it the way we want to. We are currently looking into solutions to allow you to sort of platform select and switch your styles depending on what platform you are on, so you can sort of theme all of those controls individually. But yeah, I hope that answers your question. I was trying to grok it a little bit.
Awesome, thank you. Awesome, Steve's here to help with a question that comes from Ashish, who's asking, is MSIX packaging a must for WinUI 3 or would MSI work?
Yeah, so that depends. That's still up in the air, I guess. And it depends where we're at when we first release. We don't want it to be a must. I think we want to support MSI and other deployment mechanisms, but it just depends on where we're at that point.
Cool, thank you. And I'll give a call out again that if anyone has questions for our guest, Matt Lacey, please be sure to ask them, and I'll make sure he gets them on the call here. All right, Ryan, finally coming back to you. We received a question on GitHub from Pius, who is asking, how is Project Reunion fitting with Maui?
Got it. Yeah, I think I got this question last month too, so I'll reiterate. Maui is a sort of a higher level framework that allows you to have a single code base and then be able to, like a .NET code base, and then be able to target multiple different platforms. WinUI really is the native platform on Windows. So just like we already have plans in motion to allow React Native apps to be using WinUI. Actually, React Native already uses WinUI 2 today, and then it eventually will use WinUI 3 on Windows. You can imagine a similar relationship between Maui and WinUI 3. We've had conversations with the Maui team about that. They're receptive to that. I think the biggest holdup to having a firm plan in that area is really just WinUI 3.0 getting finished and shipped. Because until we have a stable first entrant of the third generation of WinUI, it's hard for the Maui team to really do much in terms of graphing on top of it. So once we have that, I think those conversations will probably pick up, and you'll probably eventually see a story where Maui just ends up producing WinUI 3 when you're running a Maui app on Windows.
Awesome. Another question for you from GitHub, Ryan. Thomas is asking, sorry, this is actually from How, who's asking, can you share any progress about when the framework components of WinUI 3 can be open sourced? It has been buggy and hard to understand with some features, starting with the initial version of UWP comparing to WPF. With open sourcing it, at least we can read and understand its behaviors. For WPF, we used to decompile it before it's open source, but it's harder for WinUI to decompile.
Sure. Great question. So in terms of the value of open source, yeah, everything you said is true. I mean, I think we want to get the community's eyes on our code and being able to contribute in meaningful ways. I think we're really excited about that possibility. And actually, we have shared our source code with some groups already, sort of under NDA. And we've gotten really great interactions with those groups. And so being able to just open source it to everyone is definitely a priority for us and something that I think we really value. In terms of time frame for that, it's definitely going to be something that comes next year. It's not something that we'll be able to do this year. We have other things that we're focusing on achieving, especially Preview 3 for November before we get to open source. I'm hoping it doesn't go too far into the next year because, again, it's a high priority item and definitely a passion of the leadership on the WinUI team. And we continue to make good progress toward it. I've mentioned in previous calls that it's a pretty big process for us to get open source. There's, I think, something like 33,000 APIs if you count like functions and properties and enums and things in WinUI, and so detangling all that from the OS is just taking some time, but we'll get there next year.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan. Anna, a question for you. What samples or other resources are available for WinUI? Will new samples be made for WinUI 3.0?
Sure. So there are a few different kind of areas where we have samples. We have the XAML controls gallery, which a lot of you are probably familiar with. That gives you snippets of how to add all of our controls into your app, and also shows you a couple cool things you can do with the controls and how to customize them. So that's smaller snippets. And then we also have our content production team. Our docs team has created a bunch of end-to-end sample apps that have just been updated to use WinUI 2.4 and all the new controls that came with that. So you can find those in our documentation hub. So those are a great resource to kind of look at how to build and, an app from end to end. We also have one more avenue for samples. It is the Windows Universal Samples repo on GitHub. If you Google UWP or WinUI samples, you'll probably find this repo as one of the top items. But that gives you more in-depth samples on to do stuff like connecting a camera or connecting to Bluetooth or, showing location, things that are more, specialized. But yeah, those are the samples that we have now. For 3.0, we are hoping to update those. Of course, we already have our WinUI 3 XAML controls gallery, which you can clone from the GitHub repo. And for 3.0 specifically, we are hoping to have updated those end-to-end app samples. So when 3.0 is available, you will have a resource of an end-to-end WinUI 3.0 app to see exactly how to do things.
Awesome. Thank you, Anna. Ryan, throwing it back your way, we have a question. How should I ask this? Both from Hunter Perry, but also from Hans, who are asking, are there any updates on non-desktop WinUI 3 usage? What about Windows IoT Core? And I'm going to pair that with, so that was from Hans, but I'll pair that with Hunter, who's saying, our team would like to use WebView 2 in production as soon as possible. Any ETA of when it will receive its release under production with WinUI? Also, are there any plans on Xbox getting WebView 2 or the new Edge browser? Thanks.
Yeah, there's a lot in there, but there's basically two questions sort of wrapped up in all that. I think the first question is, will WinUI 3 come to other devices beyond desktop, or when will that happen? And the answer is it will, and the when is unknown. The promise of UWP is that it runs on every Windows device, and we want that promise to remain true, even if you're using it with WinUI 3. We're focused mainly on desktop since that's where the most users are for the first initial 3.0 release. What we do beyond 3.0 is something that still has to be planned, but we will eventually be expanding to that, but it won't be in our initial 3.0.
Sure.
And then the second question, shoot, I've forgotten it now.
It was more, I think, to the effect of when will WebView 2 receive its production quality release?
Yeah, I mean, WebView 2 will, when we ship 3.0 in WinUI, it will include WebView 2, and 3.0 will signal it's production ready, and that includes for WebView 2 usage.
Perfect. All right. So Aquib is asking any updates on WinUI 3's release schedule, particularly wondering if there are delays due to COVID-19. I'm eagerly awaiting it.
Yeah, I gave a release schedule at UnoConf about maybe a month and a half ago, and I'll reiterate it here. Basically, we're going to be shipping Preview 3 later this year. We're aiming for November. Then at UnoConf, I said we're going to ship 3.0 in 2021. It was sort of intentionally vague. I do have a date in mind that I've been socializing internally. I'm not ready to share that here. But I'll just say that the team is working hard to try and get 3.0 out the door as fast as possible. So that's the basic timeline that I can share right now, and we might have more updates as things get firmer and we have a more concrete engineering plan.
Awesome, thanks. So we've still got a good 10 minutes here. Again, Matt Lacey gave an awesome presentation today, so if anyone has questions to throw his way about the RapidXAML toolkit or open source, I'd love to pass those on to him. Otherwise, I'm going to keep bugging the members of the WinUI team here. Let's grab this one. So regarding Ink Canvas support for WinUI 3.0, are there any updates here? I'm probably going to pass that to Steve. Maybe he's the right person for that question.
For Ink Canvas, what's probably not.
But. Ryan, perhaps you have the answer here. I'd ask Mike Gilbert, but he's not on our call today.
Yeah, I can answer it. Yeah, Ink Canvas will be something that comes post 3.0. Maybe so it won't be in 3.0.
Perfect. Okay, Ryan, this one is for you also. Alvin Ashcraft just asked, are there any major breaking changes coming in Preview 3 that are known now?
Oh, that's a really good question. I'm going to open that up to anyone on here. Are you guys aware of any breaking changes? Like, it depends on what you mean by breaking. If you mean the API is different, I think no. I can't think of any.
What was the question? About with 3.0 releases, are there breaking changes? Is that?
Oh, I think I read this wrong. No, the question is, are there any major breaking changes coming in Preview 3? No, I don't think there are.
From a code perspective, no, but the project's system in the .NET SDK is going to be the biggest thing that you'll have to make changes to your project file, and we can discuss that once we get there.
Sure.
Yeah, there also maybe there are going to be some breaking changes on API, like for example the dispatcher. We are changing the dispatcher that we have today for a different type of dispatcher. We are removing out the core window from the desktop solution. It's going to return null. So we are not removing the APIs, but we are returning null in some APIs. So yes, it's going to be a small changing adjustment that people need to do from the Preview 2 to the Preview 3.
All right. Thanks for the update there. I'm going to throw a technical question to Ryan and Steve. I'm not sure which of you may know this, but MH Rastagari is asking, oh wait, that is not the one I was going to ask. Just lost it. Oh, Terry Cox, sorry. Terry Cox is asking, is the Windows Full Trust Process SDK extension affected by WinUI in any way?
Go for it, Steve.
I'm sorry, I don't know what the Windows Full Trust Process extension SDK? So is this it must be an extension SDK in the Windows for Centennial apps? I don't know. I've never heard of it, so.
Sure thing. Terry, feel free to follow up on GitHub and we'll try to get you some answers there. All right, see, that's a question that we've kind of already answered. We're getting near the end of the list for live questions here. So Ryan, you answered a question to Morton in chat around .NET 5 and WinUI and UWP. He's asking if there's any specific update on timeline regarding your answer you posted in chat.
Yeah, I don't have an update on timeline now. I think the biggest question that our team is facing on that is it okay or can we do a WinUI 3.0 release, just the initial 3.0, not 3.1, and not have that .NET 5 support for UWP? Is that a thing that's reasonable for us to do or not? There's different people that have different opinions on whether or not that's reasonable. So we're trying to sort that out. Bringing the .NET 5 support to UWP is something we want to do, but it takes more time and effort to do that. So I don't have a timeline other than just it's heavily debated, like many things internally.
Excellent. So Kiki, question for you. Faraz is asking, is there a possibility that React Native for Windows will eventually merge with the React Native repo?
I don't think we're planning on merging repos, but we do want to merge documentation as well as base installation. So when you do React Native init and then the name of your application, that you won't have to install a Windows template or a macOS template like you do today. But as far as I know, we are going to continue to be the owners and the contributors for the Windows extension of that, as well as the macOS extension of that, until further notice. That being said, we do sync with them every week, actually sometimes even twice a week. We sync with the Facebook team just to get an idea of what's going on, and we help them with some C++ stuff. They help us with some React Native implementation. So it's a community effort between the two companies working on it. So I'd say we are merged in some ways, but I don't think that the React Native for Windows repo is going into the core repo, like those union. I don't know if that's going to happen, but it might.
All right, a question for Miguel. Alan is asking, are there any plans to create XAML islands, but for hosting WPF or WinForm controls in a WinUI project?
Yes, we are planning to do that, but it's not going to be part of WinUI 3.0. It's going to be post 3.0.
Perfect. Okay, thanks, Miguel. We also had a question. I'll direct this one at Ryan. Is WinUI, wait, actually, sorry, that is not the question that I thought it was. Let me grab a new one here. This is still for Ryan, though, from Felix Dev. I remember reading that unsealing framework classes and controls, e.g. unseal all the things, was planned for WinUI 3.0. How is the status on that? Will that still happen with the WinUI 3 release, or is this now slated for subsequent release?
That's a good question, and I'm smiling because it's one of the only features that really has to either be done in 3.0 or it can't be done until 4.0. And that's because it's a pretty breaking change, and our commitment to SEMVer versioning rules means that it's not something that we could just introduce into 3.1 or 3.2. So right now, just due to the fact that we're already, I mean, everyone knows we're already delayed thanks to COVID and just thanks to the complexity of WinUI 3. We're already delayed from where we wanted to be for shipping 3.0. So, the question facing us is, do we just take on more work and make sure that we get it in 3.0, or do we just wait till 4.0 for the unsealing thing? I think we're right now aiming toward the latter, where we wouldn't be getting to the unsealed work until 4.0. If that is because we just can't do it in a 3.1 or 3.2 because we would break apps, and we can't do that. So if that's too painful for folks, then voice your opinion on the issue on GitHub.
Another question, Ryan. I'm not sure if you'll be able to speak to this. Dot Morn is asking, regarding WPF, what's the status of accepting community PRs? This was announced 2 months ago, and it seems like Morton has not yet had his PRs accepted.
Unfortunately, I don't have the answer to that, Morton, but I will take an action item from this call to follow up with the folks on our team that are running the WPF project and see if we can get an answer to that. Thank you.
All right, we're getting down to 2 minutes here, so any one of these may be the last question. I'm going to direct one to Matt Lacey, finally. Matt, thank you for hanging in here with us the whole QA time. There are a lot of students that follow WinUI, especially our open source repo. And given that your talk was on the topic of open source, are you able to make any recommendations towards students who are looking to get involved with open source, like good places to start or perhaps some resources?
So the help wanted tag is probably the best place to start. So lots of repos, including WinUI, I believe, have used the help wanted tag as indicators of great places, where people want, well, maintainers want investment and want people to contribute. That's a great way to get started. If you have a specific project you want to get involved with, I'd ask what, and they're not using that method. I would ask, what can I do to get involved? What can I do to help? These are the skills I have. These are my interests. The what can I do to help is always a bit of a vague question because, well, it depends what you're capable of. So if you can answer and say, I'm really good at this, or I'm interested in this, or I want to learn about these features, what can I do? If you want to learn about features, writing documentation as you go is a great way to get started as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. Kiki, quick question for you here while we still have a minute. How is the Fluent UI React package working into React Native for Windows? Do I need to use the Fluent UI button, or can I use the React Native for Windows button, just as an example?
So if you know that your component that you're using on the JavaScript layer is using the native control on the native layer, then you're going to get WinUI for free. So they're actually going to look the same. But if you are designing your own JavaScript component, then you would want to use the Fluent UI stuff that the Fluent UI React Native.
Perfect.
But I would probably stick just to React Native for Windows for now, because a lot of that stuff is coming down the line and we're aligning with their design choices. So if you're using all native controls, you're going to get that stuff for free anyways. So
awesome. All right, so we're at 10 o'clock now. I just want to say to everyone who asked a question, thank you. If we didn't get to your question, fear not. I've collected all of them, and I keep a backlog of questions to ask on future calls, and I try to keep a good balance there. So if there's anything pressing, please be sure to ask on our repo. Some things may have been skipped just because we didn't have the appropriate area owner here to get answers, and I want to be sure that we're not wasting your time. So follow up with us on GitHub. Thank you to Kiki and Matt for joining us today as presenters on guest topics. And I'll turn it back over to Anna.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Savoy, for manning our Q&A as usual. And thank you all for tuning in. As Savoy said, we want to give a huge thank you to our presenters, Matt and Kiki. You guys are awesome. Definitely check out the RapidXAML toolkit and check out React Native for Windows. Just really great stuff. So I hope everyone enjoyed the call and has a great rest of their day. All right. Bye, everyone.